Good morning. I'm Kiara Overs, DE&I Programming and Partnerships Coordinator for the Institutes, and welcome to Thriving Together, Embracing a Multi-Generational Workforce. As Generation Z enters the workforce, 5 generations are now working side by side for the first time, and risk management and insurance organizations are facing the challenge of motivating and engaging individuals that span from Gen Z to traditionalists while avoiding generational conflict. So today in this session, we have our panelists who will discuss how organizations can cultivate a generationally diverse workforce and harness a multitude of strengths by cultivating mutual respect, trust, and understanding among members of each generation. And ultimately, risk management and insurance organizations are primed to benefit from the diversity of thought and perspectives. This is such an important topic, and I am pleased to be your moderator today, along with our wonderful panelists who you will hear from and meet on this important topic. So before we dive into our discussion, I'd love for you all to meet our wonderful panelists. So to get us started, Tiara, if you could please introduce yourself, as well as tell us the generation you identify with.
Thank you so much. My name is Tiara Wallace. I am in Dallas, Texas, and I am a risk manager for a commercial real estate company called Billingsley. I've been in the insurance and risk space since 2005, and I am the best generation ever, which is a millennial.
Thank you, Tiara. And Andrew?
Thanks, Kira. Andrew Knight. I lead the executive and professional practice at Berkshire Hathaway Specialty Insurance in Canada. I have 20 years in the insurance industry, always on the underwriting side. And I guess I would identify, even though I'm on a border number, with a Generation X. Almost millennial, but Generation X.
Thank you, Andrew. And Christina?
Hello, everyone. My name is Christina, and I'm the president of Veras Career. We are an insurance-focused recruitment agency with offices in Toronto and Miami. And I am the lucky one living in Miami, but I also have team members who are actually shoveling the snow in Toronto in the wintertime. God bless them for doing this for us. And I am Gen X.
Thank you, Christina. And last but certainly not least, Leo.
Thank you very much. Hi, everyone. My name is Leo Panfill. I'm a diversity, inclusion, and belonging specialist at QBE North America. I've been in the insurance space for about a year, and I can say it's definitely been fruitful since joining. And I am a Gen Zer. I won't be biased and say that we're the best generation, but personally, I do think we are.
Thank you so much, Leo, and thank you all for your wonderful introductions. And as you can see, we have a wonderful panelists today representing a number of generations. So we're certainly in for a treat for a great discussion on such an important topic. So to get us started, it's important to understand each generation. We come from unique experiences and have our own strengths and contributions that come into the workforce. So Christina, if you could get us started and share whether that's your personal experience or if you can speak on others if you've worked with other generations, what can you say are the key strengths and unique contributions that each generation brings to the risk management and insurance industry? And how can organizations effectively leverage these perspectives?
Thank you very much for the opportunity again. So I would say that curiosity and the lack of bias would be something I would certainly mention here, especially from my own personal experience. I'm sure that all of you can hear the funny accent. I was actually born and raised in Hungary in Eastern Europe before I immigrated to Canada. And the way I ended up in insurance, I actually got a producer job at Aon a long time ago, like 15, 20 years ago. And the reason why they actually hired me was that they wanted to have somebody who was relatively early at their career and somebody who didn't have any unconscious bias. In other words, somebody who didn't have any kind of thought about, okay, the current market is already full with producers, we cannot grow our market share and whatnot. Somebody who would be hungry to, to learn new things from other generations, somebody who would have the discipline to actually learn the profession from scratch. And that's why I think that generations can actually learn a lot and contribute a lot when they actually listen and they care, and when they don't have really any unconscious bias toward each other.
Thank you, Christina, for those thoughts and sharing your experience. And I definitely think it's important to have that unconscious bias and understanding each generation. So, Leo, how do you believe risk management and insurance organizations can foster an environment of mutual respect and understanding among different generations to avoid generational conflict and promote collaboration?
Yeah, I think risk management and insurance organizations can foster an environment of mutual respect and understanding among the different generations by first creating a culture where everyone feels that they belong. Obviously, that's easier said than done, but we need to incorporate clear guidelines that support diversity and inclusion across the different dimensions of diversity, and not just the ones that are commonly spoken about. There needs to be an understanding that everyone's voice will be heard and valued, right? We need to kind of remove that stigma that, the mentor-mentee relationship is solely based on age. I believe that there's knowledge to be shared across the different generations, and that knowledge can benefit an organization and propel them forward if everyone's open to receiving it. People just have to be open and willing again. And so, a level 2 professional that might be higher up in the ranks can certainly still learn from someone that's fresh out of college and that's considered a level 5 employee, and vice versa.
Thank you for those thoughts, Leo. And I couldn't agree more, especially when it comes to the mentorship side. Being able to learn from each other, and usually, it comes by age, but definitely, someone younger can learn from someone older, and someone from a higher level can learn from someone from a lower level. So if you could also add on to that, how do you think organizations can promote intergenerational mentorship and reverse mentoring programs to facilitate the transfer of knowledge and skills between different generations?
Yeah, when I think of a mentor, it's often viewed as a person, helping me progress or develop throughout a professional career. Well, that's often what the thought is. And I think a mentor can be much more than that. In my experience, I've seen that the best mentor-mentee relationships are the ones where the mentee does seek out that connection and wants to learn from the mentor. It's on the individual to seek out the mentorship as much as it's on the organization to pair people up. Mentor-mentee relationships are often most productive and beneficial for both parties when it's created from a natural bond, and both parties are willing to learn from each other. As I alluded to earlier, there has to be a reciprocity that happens within a mentor-mentee relationship, where the individual seeking the knowledge can also provide a different perspective and outlook on the workforce that the tenured employee may not have had. In my honest opinion, how beneficial a mentor-mentee relationship is can come down to how comfortable they are with each other. If one person in the partnership is more comfortable and transparent than the other, there might be some knowledge shared there, of course, but I don't believe the partnership will be as productive and fruitful as it could be. Organizations can certainly promote more intergenerational mentorships by creating a culture that fosters and promotes knowledge sharing and collaboration. So from this, I feel natural bonds will be formed and intergenerational mentorships and reverse mentoring will happen. And if an organization then chooses to explore more strategic pairings, then I think that could be impactful.
Thank you for those thoughts, Leo. And it's definitely very important for those relationships to form naturally. I think that can definitely be a lot more beneficial, along with the strategic side as well, to continue those programs. And as well as mentorships and reverse mentoring programs, we can also talk about sponsorships that can be beneficial between multi-generational colleagues. So Tiara, if you could add on to that and kind of speak upon the sponsorship side of the programs in multi-generational workforces?
Sure. I think, like Leo said, the mentorship is important where there's reciprocity and it goes both ways. The sponsor, a lot of times, is going to be someone that is almost the person that puts you in that career advancement. So you have a sponsor that introduces you. Now, oftentimes this can be inclusive with your mentor, or a sponsor could be somebody that is solely to get you in a place that promotes you, whether in your organization or even in your industry. You may have a sponsor that highlights you within your industry that can get you opportunities for your career growth. So oftentimes you have a mentor that can aid in sponsoring you, but it's important to notice the difference because the mentor is going to look more, in my opinion, from a holistic perspective on your professional and personal growth, where the sponsor is not solely for that, but their main focus is your career advancement. And so it's important to have both or either one that can do the dual role.
Thank you so much, Tiara, for those additional thoughts. And we've talked about mentorships and sponsorships and all these programs and how they could possibly help with engaging and embracing a multi-generational workforce. And Andrew, if you could provide any examples that have proven successful in motivating and engaging a multi-generational workforce within the risk management and insurance industry, or something that you believe could work in embracing this workforce.
For sure. Thanks, Kira. And if you value perspectives that differ from your own and enjoy collaborating, it's a great time to be in the insurance industry right now. And if I look at ways to really motivate and engage, I think it really starts with education and really thoughtful means around communication strategies and recognition that not everyone absorbs or cares to absorb information in the same fashion. When I look at a distribution strategy for information, it's important. Every employee interacts with technology very differently. You really can't leave anyone behind. For example, a detailed email outlining information or strategies is likely read or absorbed by some, but possibly not all. It could largely be ignored by a younger generation who prefer to have more informal or more casual language and dissemination of information, i.e. a Teams call or a department meeting to discuss. There's something a little bit more conversational where less formality exists. And to motivate and engage, you've really got to have a strategy that reaches everyone. So I think that's very important. Organizations and leaders really need to recognize that depending on who and how the information is disseminated, there's a potential that the meaning itself or the tone can be lost in translation for older and younger generations based on how the information was presented. Younger generations write their emails a different way. They might be influenced by usage of texts or DMs versus emails in their daily life. And though it might be seen as overly flippant or informal to older generations, it's seen by that generation as being very speed efficient and very to the point. And the middle generation who grew up with email and were more early adopters of email will be more comfortable with that means of communication and receiving information in that fashion. And for the generation even before that, like their hurdle was from the phone and from in person moving to email. So we have to remember, I think, in general, that the older the individual, the older the generation, the more change they've had to endure, and the more they've had to deal with over a longer period of time. And patience has to be a part of that strategy and how we engage everybody. So I feel that in terms of having a strategy, I mean, it's a very basic thought, but often overlooked. The management of the means of communications is important when dealing with different generations. And one other strategy I know, Leo and Tiara alluded to, just around mentorship. I had some thoughts on that too. We too often think that it's valuable for us as a mentor or as a mentee, when really it should be a personal experience. It's got to be mutually additive, as Leo mentioned, and it's got to be comfortable. I think too often organizations will force the union when they really should merely endorse it to maximize experience. It should be comfortable. Younger generations are not necessarily open to adding or providing a lot of information to somebody who's seen as an older superior. They'd rather be a peer. And from my experience being a middle generation or Generation X, if you will, I always enjoyed the mentorship relationship being someone who is more superior, more older, more experienced. But I can't assume that somebody who's younger than I wants to have that same experience with me. So that's important. And when we hear now more about the reverse mentoring, and it's you hear about it quite often now, but it could be very insightful for somebody who's younger, tech savvy from a different generation, pairing up with somebody who's more experienced and maybe struggling with technology or adapting to new technologies or personal branding, et cetera. So those could be very fruitful for organizations. But overall, you just can't tell people how they should engage and what they want. You gotta let them own the experience. And lastly, I'll say, Kira, in terms of strategies or initiatives, I think it's important that organizations need to embrace the idea of lifelong learning and professional growth, regardless of generation. Opportunities through LinkedIn or through seminars, through technology courses or internal rotational programs, whatever that might be. You got to be inclusive. You can't just focus on a sales component or sales individual or a younger generation for those strategies. People want to feel that they're growing alongside of the organization themselves, feeling like they're growing alongside their colleagues and see a future at the organization because they continue to learn. We can't just assume that learning element is going to be the younger group. There are people in my role and people in roles that have much more senior than I and generations that came before me that still want to forever learn and want to develop. So that's an important strategy that companies need to embrace and leaders need to embrace on behalf of their companies.
Thank you, Andrew. And those are some wonderful points. And to allude to that, it's definitely, as you said, with all these points, it's important for organizations to educate themselves on each generation in order to come up with these strategies. One thing is to know, like, how does each generation work? How does a millennial communicate versus a Gen X or a Gen Z? So to come with that education, it's also important to understand things such as stereotypes and misconceptions that could be barriers to having these successful relationships between all generations. So Tiara, if you could get us started on this, what would you say are some common misconceptions or stereotypes about different generations in the workplace? And how can organizations overcome these to create a more inclusive and harmonious work environment? So this can be your experience with your specific generation or things that you have seen with other generations that you have worked with.
Yeah, I think definitely just speaking to the millennial group and kind of what that stereotype is that we are often perceived or stereotyped as entitled, or that we have, we're difficult to work with employers due to lack of loyalty of staying with one employer, and that we need excessive encouragement or feedback. And I think a lot of that, when you look at the generalized stereotype within the millennial group, is where they have been those ambitious, and we are the group, similar to what Andrew said, with us and the Generation X, where we played outside, but then we were the first to see technology being ushered in. So we kind of have that balance to where we saw our parents and grandparents stay loyal to one company, one industry, and some of the things that they had that their employers offered, we didn't. So we've been able to say, okay, what is my professional development plan? Does it align with this company or industry, and how do I move about and make it individualized and include that work-life balance, because that's important to us. And I think when you have a generation like that can bring in ideas for some of the older generations, I often say that it allows you to overcome maybe things that weren't necessarily the best work model. So it's not like millennials are coming in and saying, we only want this for this group. It's, let's make this experience better across. I think as we think about what's going to happen in the next couple of years, where we will have an exodus of certain generations leaving the workforce and even our specific industry in the insurance and risk, I think we need to begin to think of, like, what will this look like? How do we set up our industry and our organizations, of course, but what's our succession plan? What will not only the physical work structure look like, i.e. hybrid work, but organizational? How will we set that up? Communication, like Andrew mentioned, we have to have a strategic plan for communication, collaboration, And how do we fight past those stereotypes to arrive to say, okay, let's get to know the person. Like there is a bias here, but let's get to know the person for who they are and move this either workplace or this industry to the next level so we're not left behind. I mean, a stereotype for the insurance industry is we're often seen as a laggard, like we're the old, like we don't catch up much. And I'd love to see that change because it is a great industry. So I'll open it up so anyone else can speak about their generations.
Yeah, I can add a bit to that as well. There's a common misconception that Gen Zers are lazy and don't want to work, and I personally don't agree with that. Not because I'm a Gen Zer myself, but I just don't feel that's true. I think as time goes on, more and more resources are becoming available to people to use. And as Andrew mentioned, you know, that can also be a benefit, right? The older generations are now having to adapt to more and more change, which could be a bit more difficult, right? And I feel this is where Gen Zers can be beneficial to a workspace and organization and helping kind of lead and champion some of this change. And kind of advocating for some of that change and incorporating new policies and systems and structures using these resources that can better procedures and how an organization goes about certain things. And so, you know, I don't believe Gen Zers are lazy. I just think that we're using the resources that are available to us. And, you know, as the newer and newer generations come about, there probably will be similar misconceptions developed for them too, because technology is only progressing and moving forward. And it's not waiting for us at all. So it's up to us to kind of catch up to that and be sure we're staying current, as TR alluded to.
Thank you, Leo, for those additional thoughts. And we're talking about these barriers and challenges, which are these misconceptions and stereotypes that can keep us from embracing this multi-generational workforce, you know, creating those reverse mentorship programs and having everyone be able to understand each other. So, Andrew, if you could also add on, do you think there are any challenges or barriers that arise from managing a multi-generational workforce in the risk management and insurance industry? And how can these be effectively addressed? I know we've talked about misconceptions and stereotypes, but is there anything more you could add to that?
For sure, Kira. And I look at, when we talk about, you know, managing a multi-generational workforce, I look at maybe almost changing the word managing to leading. And when I look at leading, it's one of the challenges for leadership right now, and leaders is understanding the differing views of a manager. You know, so for a leader or for a manager to be aware of what their value and their role is in terms of maximizing the output or potential of an employee. An example of that would be, you know, the boomers viewed leaders essentially as strategic thinkers, I guess, and those that should be admired and yet distant from the business, I guess. Whereas myself, as more of a Gen Xer, I want a leader to be a role model and somebody who'll roll up the sleeves and kind of work alongside me and be part of that team. And millennials will more look at a leader to be somebody who they can connect with as an employee and unite everybody into a common purpose. So, you know, a leader's job is really to mobilize and to inspire each generation a little bit differently, regardless of, you know, their age or where they might fall into. And that's a challenge because the method in which they do so has got to be, you know, quite adaptable. The overarching theme, however, though, has got to be that few things can't be compromised or taken for granted at all. And that's transparency, you know, clarity of purpose, trust, and respect, regardless of generation. And those are really two-way streets as well. And those elements cut through any generational division. And to earn this, you know, leaders have got to be engaged, talk to the team, and really normalize feedback, because older generations, you know, won't want to hear it often. You know, younger generations will want to hear more regular feedback and words of encouragement. That's just the reality. And regular check-ins are important in understanding who's on the team, who you're working alongside, and understanding that part of the earning of the trust and earning of that transparency between two people is also just discussing more than just work. It's life, it's work. And it really helped create that bond or that relationship and that lane for transparency to drive right through. You know, so really, to answer your question, I guess, you know, in terms of challenges on diverse teams and organizations, there's plenty of them. And I think most notably the fact that there are stereotypes, as previously alluded to. because society finds it very convenient to put us in buckets or to group us, even though not everyone who falls within the goalpost of maybe the time element behaves the same way or is influenced by the same things. So as a leader, as a manager, you've got to get rid of those stereotypes and suspicions. You've got to cut through that. Despite it being a natural human behavior, leaders of organizations have to disregard leading in with a stereotype when talking to a colleague or a peer or somebody on the team. It's productive, it's not additive, and it's definitely not inspiring. And it creates more of a division, me versus you or you versus I. And really, it's placing unrealistic expectations or dated expectations on somebody. So, for example of that would be, and I deal with this all the time, and I have to kind of catch myself too, is talking to a younger teammate and saying, and they want to try to build their own brand, they want to build their networking. I would say at times, this is how we used to do it. We were always doing this, we were always doing that. We were here every day, we were out after work, building relationships, doing it this way. That's not really something that they want to hear. It's not something that's a reality for them now. So that is something that is definitely not, it's reductive. It's not really speaking to their reality and what they're facing right now. They won't influence positive behaviors. So basically a diverse and inclusive workspace where people feel understood as individuals is important for a leader. And that'll make sure that the organization, the teams, they have higher likelihood of retention, higher morale. And, so often we talk about not stereotyping on race or gender or ethnicity. And we shouldn't stereotype on age or generation too. So I think we forget that sometimes. And ultimately we're a product of our world events that we live through, our economic conditions we experience at a certain age. They'll influence our behaviors, our priorities and our expectations. And not everyone's experience is equal. And as a leader, it's not your job to really rationalize the behaviors at all. It's to maximize the potential of the team and the people around you. So it's important to be a resource and to be a support mechanism for all generations. So if a younger or older employee's contributions aren't being taken seriously, be an ally. Let the idea be judged itself, not necessarily the source of the idea. Let the idea itself get some oxygen. So basic communication skills and principles are important. And really, it's more difficult now with 5 generations in the workforce for managers and leaders to kind of navigate and inspire in a multi-generational workforce.
Thank you for that, Andrew. And I love what you said about, not just managing a multi-generational workforce, but leading, that includes that being adaptability and being able to push through those biases and unconscious biases that we may have towards other generations. So thank you so much for those thoughts. And Tiara, how can organizations encourage knowledge sharing and collaboration across generations to capitalize on the diverse expertise and experiences of each generation, or whether that's your generation? How can you speak on that?
So I think, like we mentioned, having that support, and I think Andrew mentioned it, where the endorsement for the organizations to have a mentorship or a cross collaboration between different departments. But I sometimes think that an actionable step that we need to keep in mind is that when we're making up the teams of our organizations and we're looking at the teams and they're diverse, are we just matching people because there's an older employee and a younger employee, while not looking at if they're compatible, if their learning style is compatible? Because as Leo mentioned, there has to be some commonality that allows that natural relationship to flourish, where they're at least open or at least have that emotional intelligence to push past their bias to get to know one another. So I think how organizations can come in and is to be very intentional with who they're pairing with, to say, hey, you're the lead with this team. Let's show them the why we do this, like what goes on behind the regulatory compliance, or what goes on the claim side to determine this, or underwriting, but then allow someone from a different generation to change the how we do it. So a lot of times you have an older generation that's like, this is the way we've always done it. And then you have someone from a younger generation that gets upset because they're like, oh my God, that's 25 steps and I can have it done in 2 steps. And then you begin to see this clash of the egos of this is the way it's always been done, has to be done this way. And then you have where this person wants to come in and be innovative with our process. And we somehow turn them away from the organization and ultimately away from the industry. Because if you can't make headway with a big name company in this industry, then how will you ever make your mark, which is important to certain people within there. So I think being intentional with the teams, and then also when you think of things like team building, meeting events for the organizations, are we planning these around things that it's always the way we've done it? Or are we taking into account the diverse and different set of interests? So is your team building bowling? Are you able to reach all of your teams if they're not even physically present? And I think with the pandemic, that caused us to kind of shake some things up and think outside of that. I think we need to also embrace that as well so that we can transfer that knowledge. Once you feel comfortable with somebody and you see them outside of the person that sends you that annoying email maybe once a month, and you begin to see them as a person that you can go to as a source of knowledge or institutional knowledge, I think then that opens up the door to where they can push past part of those bias, and then they're able to bring others in to say, oh, Penny over in accounting is great. You just have to ask her this, and it changes, I think, the trajectory of your team as a whole.
Thank you for that. And Christina, was there anything we'd like to add to that?
Yes, and I also would like to bring up a topic that is very close to my heart, and it is also, I believe, going to give some additional colors to this conversation. And let me talk about like new immigrants and people who are actually new to the country, because those what we are talking about here, like, you know, the different generations at the workplace and everything. Can you imagine that how somebody feels like, let's say, for example, I'm a Gen X and I join an organization, let's say in the United States, but I was actually born and raised in Eastern Europe, and all my biases and all my thoughts and the way I was raised and the way I was socialized in the workplace is different than what you are expecting from me in the United States or for example in Canada. And let's say, for example, I try to be something but I am not, and I'm trying to understand you, and you are not just another generation, but you are also somebody who socialized in a different culture, so it can be even more challenging. And so speaking of the insurance industry general, like, you know, because there are less and less fresh blood in this industry, we actually need to embrace that there will be newcomers from other countries who are actually going to join this industry, and those people will also represent certain generations, and they will also need some support to actually be part of the team and to actually get into these, for example, mentor-mentee relationship or learn from each other or include them. And I am actually very excited to see how we are actually developing the corporate culture, and how we are actually trying to adapt the corporate culture to embrace that kind of a challenge.
Thank you so much, Christina. And I definitely agree. This is all important information that like leaders need to know in terms of how to be adaptable and inclusive when it comes to this generation and all the generations that are to come, because that's a perfect way to understand how we can be adaptable and be intentional when it comes to collaborating with our generations in our industry. So Leo, to add on to that, what role do you believe leadership can play in creating an inclusive and supportive environment for a multi-generational workforce, and what leadership qualities are particularly important for that context?
Yeah, to add to that, I'd say leadership plays a major role in creating an inclusive and supportive environment for a multi-generational workforce. Leadership really sets the tone for what everyone else is doing in the organization, right? So if leaders aren't supporting a specific generation and the knowledge that they have to share, there might be a trickle-down effect from where that specific generation's thoughts aren't as valued as much as others. And you know, leaders need to create a sense of psychological safety for their people, where people feel they can share their thoughts, opinions, and concerns openly. Um, I also believe that there are many different leadership qualities that can play a role in creating a more inclusive and supportive multi-generational workspace. Some of them are humility. I believe a humble leader understands that they don't know everything and leans on their people for support. Also, I'd say self-awareness. Self-awareness goes hand in hand with humility, in my opinion. It's really understanding where you lack and where others can pour into you and support you from their roles. Also, a leader needs to have great listening skills. Someone can feel comfortable and confident speaking up and contributing in a team setting if they know they will be heard. And lastly, I'd say emotional intelligence. It's key that a leader can understand their own emotions as well as their teams. Simply understanding that someone might not be in the emotional space to provide input at the moment can help a person feel more empowered and comfortable to contribute more in the future when they're feeling okay. And that's all right. You know, someone does not always have to provide their input if they're not up for it.
Thank you, Leo. And I definitely agree. I think it's important. You had some good points, especially about the emotional intelligence and that self-reflection. As a leader, it's definitely a challenge when you are going to be managing or leading almost 5 generations at the most. And so having that ability and those skills are important. And it's definitely something that has to be kind of learned because it takes some time to get away of those biases and that unconscious bias or the stereotypes you might have about that person in that generation. So thank you for those thoughts. And Andrew, if you could add to this, in what ways can risk management and insurance organizations adapt their recruitment and training and career development practices to attract and retain talent from all generations?
For sure. Yeah. And we're very fortunate too. Like, I feel that our industry is becoming more and more diverse in terms of who contributes and at what level, at the senior levels. And I think we're doing a very good job, but can do a better job of attracting younger talent and talent from outside and other industries. And I think with the pandemic really proved that the industry is resilient and we can attract talent because it evolved through a very difficult time and we weathered that very difficult time period very well in industry. So to keep that momentum going, a few things really come to mind for me. And one is that it starts at the beginning, like to write and craft very inclusive job posts. You know, get opinions from people with diverse backgrounds, whether it's using a panel of people or just reviewers, making sure that what the organization puts out there in terms of its actual document about what the job entails, and even the process of interviewing. You know, make sure that the words used are purposeful. You know, the items outlined, the posting, and the people representing the organization in those interviews are reflective of an organization that promotes diversity and inclusion. But still be very clear about what defines the job role and the skills and competencies that it requires. So you got to be very intentional when you're advertising. Think about the pool of candidates that you're trying to attract and tap into, and really think about when you're talking about generations, like how one might apply, like email, phone, LinkedIn, etc. You know, older generations might want to pick up a phone and talk to somebody about the role. You know, younger ones might want to text the contact noted or provide a LinkedIn message and find out more that way. You know, and each might be uncomfortable if left with only one device or one means to really reach out to the organization to find more information. So really use words that people will, you know, identify with and will capture the spirit of the organization and inspire a wide range of groups and generations. I find that's really important. Secondly, I look at, you know, be very purposeful and be thoughtful in the employee benefits and perks when you're talking about multi-generational workforces. You know, different aspirations, different needs and wants depending on the age and where people are in their life cycle. You know, research, and it's obvious that, you know, it's showing that the younger generations value work-life balance differently than some of the older generations. And that should be outlined in the job posting. That should be something that is very important to people. It should be outlined very clearly so nobody has any false expectations going into an interview or going into a new role. You know, packages that outline things that are important, like health and well-being initiatives. That's becoming more and more of an interest to multi-generations now. And for older generations, those that have been loyal, I think we don't do a very good job sometimes rewarding those with service. Employees that have stuck around for a long period of time, more vacation days or certain perks based on tenure. And we look at sometimes, improving the culture of organizations as merely, finding new talent. Sometimes it's retaining the great people that we have that have been loyal to the organization over an extended period of time. So still on the theme of, perks and employee benefits, thoughtful approach around something like debt assistance. For some, that's a perk. For others, it's a necessity. It's a deal breaker. Newer generations are coming up with, are walking into the industries with more debt and are making life decisions. That is becoming very stressful for younger generations, especially in this interest rate environment and where the economy is right now. So that's something that should be clearly, if possible, outlined in a job description or employee benefits package, because that'll retain great people. And then lastly, just overall, just do your research. Tiered benefits, optionality. For different people will want different things, and it'll come to a point where a benefits package doesn't reflect what I want or what he wants or she wants. So you have to be very dynamic in that component. And I'll also say, because it's something that's very important to us at Berkshire Hathaway here, important initiatives outside the work itself. Getting collaboration around DEI community, DEI committees, community giving committees, et cetera. Seek out a balance of talent from all generations when evaluating, the composition of those committees. And because those committees are the ones that are going to help shape the organization today, but also in the next generation. And it's got to be reflective of what the company is today, but also what it wants to be. It needs to represent the values and contributions of all generations. So, and this is just a different way for generations to connect. And it's not work related. It's social. It's working towards a unifying experience or goal. And it's a gratifying experience when you're talking about doing something that's just unrelated to the business, but it's part of the organization and part of the culture. So I think it's important to be dynamic in how those types of organizations are setting up their committees and how they're operating those employee-led initiatives.
Thank you, Andrew. And I think that's definitely important to think about those committees and like generations all coming together, not just in the professional side, but on that social side too, and understanding each other to have that same vision. And Christina, I know you have an interesting background in career consulting and recruiting. So like, what can you add on to this as well?
Thank you. So what I would like to bring up here is that basically, when it comes to hiring talent for the insurance industry, the first and most important statement I would say is that we are looking for financial first responders, people who are actually interested in helping each other, people who are actually interested in helping out businesses, in their darkest hours. And at the same time, when it comes to different generations, this message needs to be tailored to different generations. So like, for example, there are younger people who are actually, I'm sure that they will actually resonate with this message that I can be a financial first responder, I can actually help out these businesses, but also there are other generations, like people who are more senior in the workforce, who may not be interested in being a financial first responder, but they would really want to help like a business or somebody, but they just don't like this romantic name for this. And especially for that reason, I think we need to tailor the message. We need to constantly check the market. Like there are certain groups that are actually on social media. There are certain groups that are only focusing still on print ads. And also there are actually candidates who cannot be reached anywhere, but like only on networking events. So we need to listen to that. And even when we don't work with a recruiter, like a specialist recruitment agency, even as internal recruiters, we need tailor our approach to these people, and we need to tailor our approach to those generations. Also, for example, we see like recruitment in the form of sending out text messages, and like I want to be honest about it. Like 10 years ago, if somebody would have told me that, oh, Christina, one day somebody is going to send you a text message asking if you are looking for a job, and you will say, yes, I want to hear more, I would have said, no, it's not going to happen. Like it's not personal, it's nothing. But I don't want to judge. It can be personal. We just need to go out and we need to, add some color to this. And even in a text message, we can send a smiley, for God's sake. So just be a human being. And also the other thing I would like to bring up here is the open mind from the hiring manager side. And again, I can only speak about the recruitment, so the retention is not necessarily my area of expertise, but the open mind is a two-way street, because if somebody like a hiring manager is not listening to their recruitment partner, and they are just sending out job descriptions or posting jobs on social media, LinkedIn, or wherever it is, and the job description is strictly tailored to the organization and not to the candidate, and not talking to the candidate, and not listening to what the candidates may need, like the employee benefits and whatnot, or even just some kind of buzzwords that the candidates would like to see in the job posting, it's not going to work. They won't get the applicants that they are looking for. So they need good storytellers. They need to listen to their recruitment partners. They need to listen even to those who actually got those positions, and people who they hired, because there was a reason why this person accepted the job offer. There was a reason why this individual decided to join my organization. So survey these individuals would be also very, very important to see, and also to constantly check in with them if they are still enjoying working there, because one day like people will start looking. It's not going to happen like the current generations, and I'm also talking about Gen Xers. So Gen Xers, yes, we were loyal to a certain extent, but a time will come when we actually want more for some reason, and we will start looking. But we need, as an organization, our most important job is to try to keep these individuals for as long as possible. And I need to check in with them, and I need to know what's going on in their lives, and I need to know why they are actually no longer interested in my organization. And I cannot be a mind reader. The only way I can do is that I check in with them and I talk to them.
Thank you, Christina, for those thoughts. And you and Andrew made some great points, especially when it comes to, like, looking at the job descriptions. Who are these actually tailored towards? Is it tailored towards one generation, or is it all? Or who are you actually strategically looking for to recruit? And when you get those people, why are they leaving, or why are they staying? I think those are important questions to ask, when we are having a multi-generational workforce, and who are we keeping and who are we not retaining? Thank you for those thoughts. And lastly, Tiara, if you can answer our last question, how can diversity of thought and perspectives resulting from a multi-generational workforce positively impact innovation and problem solving within the risk management and insurance industry?
Yeah, I think all the actionable, observable things that we've all shared on here actually show that we can truly, from different generations, set up our industry for a successful and sustainable industry. Our industry has been around for an extremely long time. And of course, as we've seen different successes come in, I really think as we take a look at where we are as a society and as a culture, we're seeing some different differences come in than what we've traditionally seen. So I think when you get every generation together and you play to all of the strengths that we have, and you take that 360 view, this allows us to create innovative ways to handle claims and to handle underwriting, and then to also handle, the brokering side of it. And I think that the possibilities are unlimited. If you consider all the manual and tedious parts of our job that we do every day, that I know at some point we've said, if there was a way to get this done like this, I could focus more on value added productivity. I think that goes to show you like where we have the makings to make this so great, where you can bring together the different generations. And like we said, everybody works together so that it's efficient, it's effective, and that would be amazing. And I honestly think that's where success would look like for us, is if we all played to the strengths of the different groups. You have the strength of experience, you have innovation, you throw a little collaboration in there, mix it with some communication. And then I really think that we will revolutionize and modern our industry and set it up for the next 15, 20, 30 years.
Thank you so much, Tiara, for those final thoughts. And we do have a few minutes left. And so with any webinar, I think it's important to have a call to action or share some final thoughts from each person on what you think can help organizations to truly build and support a multi-generational workforce that is thriving and inclusive. So whether that's a common barrier one may face and how to work through that, a best practice, or something that you've seen that we have not discussed already. Let's leave our audience with some great tips and information that really helps to address cultivating a generationally diverse workforce. So Christina, I would love to start with you. If you could share any final thoughts before we close off our webinar.
Thank you very much, Tiara. So what I would like to, Kiara, so what I would like to say here is that everybody needs to feel welcomed, and feeling welcomed, it's not just always about sending out an email that, hey, we have so-and-so joining the firm, and please welcome this person because, this individual is going to work on that team and so on. So, but honestly, I saw a wonderful practice back in Europe, and that was they actually asked in advance what was their favorite candy or what was their favorite cookie, and they actually left a piece of that cookie on the desk of the new hire on the first day. And honestly, like, it was just a tiny little thing, but I remember that those candidates who actually started at this firm, they felt welcome, and it wasn't about generations. Like a Gen X, a baby boomer, or a Gen Z can actually appreciate a little piece of candy that was specifically chosen for them on their first day. So just tiny little things, just pay attention to each other and care for each other. I think it's doable.
Thank you. And yes, I definitely agree with that. And Leo, would you be able to add any final thoughts as well?
Yeah, and I think this kind of goes along with what Christina just shared. Understanding that people are people and not just your employees or your worker for your organization. People are people, real life people with real life circumstances that they may not be disclosing to you. And so, whether it's you jump on a call and before you go right into business and you ask someone, how are you? Something as simple as that can go a long way and can really make someone feel very comfortable regardless of the generation. I do think, Gen Zs are always thought of as people who really care about well-being and mental health, but I've seen from personal experience, just a smile and a how are you can make someone that might not be a Gen Zer and maybe from an older generation feel more comfortable, and they might just be having a hard day, and you never know. And so understand that people are people, and sometimes they need that moment before you jump right into the business. Just address them as a person and acknowledge them as a person.
Thank you for those thoughts, Leo. And Tiara?
I would definitely say 2 points. The first one is you don't have to wait on your organization to have a formal mentoring process. There are a lot of us that work for smaller companies or maybe don't have the employee resource groups or just a formal process. But everyone can always be an informal leader and see someone coming into the industry or into their organization that they say, you know what, that is someone that is a top tier quality person of integrity that will propel this industry forward. Let me take the chance to get to know them and just kind of talk shop. And I think that is one way that all of us in our everyday lives can make change. And then I think the other thing for organizations, we touched on it briefly, Also looking to attract and retain talent in places maybe we haven't looked before. Not everyone will be on a college campus. Not everyone will be, that will start in the broker's office. So I think getting really honest about where we go to find our talent to support the industry, I think that ends up, and we end up being able to say, okay, we're attracting talent from this place, this, instead of just having a very narrow-sided plan on where to attract talent. And then, like Andrew mentioned before, then we can focus on ways to retain them. So those would be my 2 takeaways.
Thank you so much, Tiara. And lastly, Andrew.
Thanks, Kira. I would say that I firmly believe that culture starts at the top. And if an organization truly values the people and the individuals, they will give them the platform to inspire from within. And there's some strength in numbers. People should feel comfortable taking initiative to jump on committees and to start new ideas within the organization, because there are other people that think the exact same way as that person. And I think if we harvest that type of activity at organizations and in our industry, then they'll be in a very good spot, as Tiara mentioned before. And I think Leo said it great too about making sure that people understand that they're in an organization that values them as individuals and values like who they are as human beings. And I think one thing that we do really well here is that every individual who starts within a group, their manager sends out an email to the entire globe, and that person should expect, because we've grown now, close to 1,000 welcome emails over the next 2 weeks, welcoming them and saying like, oh, I didn't know you had a dog named this, or I didn't know you went to this school, or I didn't know you did this. And it's a competition around, like, you have to create a very, thoughtful email about the individual as a manager, and it inspires a lot of feedback. And immediately that individual feels they know a bunch of people that they connect with in the organization, and the organization gets very flat very quickly. And I think people will connect to more than just the organization when they feel that they're at the organization that allows them to see themselves elsewhere.
Thank you so much, Andrew. And you guys have all made some amazing points. And this is why we have discussions like these and webinars like these as such, to continue to engage the insurance and risk management industry, to thrive in the DEI space and understand one another as we thrive to be an inclusive industry, one that can embrace a multi-generational workforce. So thank you all for participating in this panel. And those of you who have tuned in to watch, we've heard some amazing thoughts and information from our wonderful panelists. They've each brought something valuable to the table. And we look forward to future conversations around DEI and work together to create an inclusive industry.